Every centavo of this budget must be spent to ensure our nation's recovery, resilience. The vaccine is available to every Filipino citizen.
"2020 has come to an end. We've faced numerous challenges that tested our strength, faith, and of course, unity. We say goodbye to this year with lessons and accomplishments earned for staying steadfast and true to the progress we have worked very hard for. Let's look back at the stories that change us throughout 2020 and will lead us into the new year. I am William Theo. Welcome to the year-ender edition of the PNA Newsroom. Here are the top stories for today, December 31, 2020. We take a dive into the government's response to the global pandemic that battered the world this year. Know how Filipinos have united in the fight against communist insurgency. Learn how the economy is bouncing back amid the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. And check out this year's rising stars of Filipino boxing. In response to a fast-spreading novel coronavirus early this year, the government has ramped up efforts to mitigate the impact of the public health crisis. The details from Laid Kabagani.
The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases and the National Task Force Against COVID-19 have adopted a carrier-centric approach to contain the spread of COVID-19. Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. of the National Policy Against COVID-19 says the government has applied the prevent, detect, isolate, treat, and reintegrate strategy in a bid to adapt to the new normal. This strategy was implemented through the operational concept of the end-to-end treat, trace, treat, or T3 management system. The T3 program also targets to ramp up testing capacity of 30,000 tests per day by putting up more swabbing centers and laboratory testing centers in strategic parts of the country. The government has intensified its national communication campaign to combat the pandemic, which includes regular hand washing, keeping physical distancing, as well as wearing of face masks and face shields. The government has imposed localized lockdowns to further prevent the transmission of the dreaded disease within local communities. It has also strengthened contact tracing and testing capacity to immediately detect more confirmed cases and provide them the treatment that they needed. In June, the government implemented the second phase of the National Action Plan that focused on saving lives and mitigating COVID-19 impact toward economic and social recovery. The second phase of the NAP was implemented through localized lockdowns, massive information dissemination, stricter enforcement of the quarantine protocols, and minimum health standards. Meanwhile, the third phase of the National Action Plan was implemented through balancing health and economic recovery. Galvez said NAP Phase 3 is anchored on effective health risk management wherein gradual easing of restrictions could be imposed. The government has intensified the whole-of-government strategy and the whole-of-nation approach to further contain the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Kabagani.
The government spared no effort to help Filipinos fight COVID-19 and cope with its effects towards the so-called new normal. One of the Duterte administration's most notable measures is the Bayanihan laws made to address the health crisis. Let's look at how the government handles the COVID-19 crisis in this report.
The Duterte administration's fight against COVID-19 got off to a rough start but started showing improvements after government recalibrated its strategy by balancing the effective control of virus transmission as well as the socio-economic costs. Through Proclamation number 922 signed March 8, President Rodrigo Duterte declared a state of public health emergency to mobilize government and non-government agencies to respond to COVID-19. On March 16, President Duterte placed the entire Luzon under Enhanced Community Quarantine or ECQ until April 12. He later signed Proclamation number 929 placing the Philippines under a state of calamity after health authorities confirmed that community-based transmission has already occurred. To mitigate the impact of the pandemic, President Duterte signed Republic Act No. 11469, also known as the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act of 2020, or Bayanihan 1, a day after Congress passed the bill on March 24. With the law in effect, the government was given authority to expedite and streamline the accreditation of testing kits to facilitate prompt testing and immediate isolation and treatment of patients. Healthcare workers, considered frontliners in the fight against COVID-19, had to be provided with COVID-19 special risk allowances in addition to their hazard pay. Their COVID-19 related medical expenses were also shouldered by government. In September, President Duterte signed RA 11494, or the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act, or Bayanihan 2, which extends his special powers for handling the pandemic and provides a 165.5 billion peso fund for addressing the health crisis. The largest chunk of the budget was allotted to loans for sectors hit by the pandemic, such as micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, transport, tourism, and agriculture. Among the most salient features of the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act was the allocation of billions worth of emergency subsidies to fund the government's Social Amelioration Program, or SAP, which grants a 5,000 to 8,000 peso monthly emergency subsidy to low-income families. The government also had other cash aid programs for the most vulnerable sectors affected by the lockdown, such as the Abot Kamay Ang Pagtulong, or AKAP, Tulong Panghanap Buhay sa Ating Disadvantaged Displaced Workers, o TUPAD, and the COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, or CAMP. In April, the government started its mass testing initiatives following the accreditation of several hospitals for COVID-19 testing. The government had also started purchasing more rapid antibody test kits. On May 6, President Duterte inked Executive Order No. 114, institutionalizing the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program designed to help low-income families in Metro Manila resettle in their home provinces. Balik Probinsya was temporarily suspended to prioritize the short-term Hatid Probinsya. To ensure the health and safety of students, President Duterte signed RA 11480, which reschedules the start of the school year in an event of a state of emergency or state of calamity. The opening of classes for school year 2020-2021 kicked off last October 5. He also stood by his decision not to allow face-to-face classes until a vaccine for COVID-19 is available in the country. On September 23, President Duterte, for the first time, participated in the UN General Assembly, where he stressed the importance of ensuring universal access to anti-COVID-19 technologies and products, including a safe and effective vaccine. He reiterated his call for equal access to vaccines in his speech during the 37th ASEAN Summit on November 12, adding that the immediate priority right now should be health security. On October 27, President Duterte said he favored a government-to-government transaction in the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines, saying it would prevent the risk of corruption. President Duterte agreed to enter into advanced market commitments to avoid being among the last countries to acquire a vaccine. On December 1, President Duterte granted authority to the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, to issue an Emergency Use Authorization, or EUA, for COVID-19 drugs and vaccines subject to several conditions. Currently, the government is negotiating with several pharmaceutical companies for the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines, namely Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Novavax, Sinovac, and Sputnik V. President Duterte cut short his Christmas vacation to meet with government officials on the new strain of SARS-CoV-2 found in the UK on December 26. He later banned UK and 19 other countries from entering the Philippines until January 15, 2021. On December 28, he signed the 4.5 trillion peso national budget for 2021 to boost the government's efforts to respond to the pandemic and provide critical measures to aid the economic and social sectors. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Rom Dulfo.
Our kababayans abroad have been among those hard hit by the pandemic. Some of them were forced to come home due to business shutdowns, while others continue to toil just to put food on the table. Joyce Cudis tells the sacrifices overseas Filipinos need to make, the hurdles they need to overcome, and how they welcome the holidays and the coming new year.
Despite the health crisis, Filipinos abroad willingly shared how some of life's biggest blessings are born out of their hardest challenges. One of them is 54-year-old Raven Osorio, who works as an engineer for 27 years in different parts of the world, including Saudi Arabia, Russia, Malaysia, South Korea, and now in Japan. His journey of being an overseas Filipino began when his older brother died, and he stepped up to be the kuya for his 4 other siblings. Eventually, he also had a family of his own, which prompted him to continue working abroad. For now, the pandemic has left Osorio temporarily out of work, but the Japanese government is providing for his monthly stipend, covering at least 60% of his previous income.
Simple lang, we'll have, me and my daughter will have dinner outside. We haven't fixed our plan yet, but of course, either kaming dalawa and with the family, of course, in Zoom or Facebook.
Osorio said there are a lot of happenings in the world that may distract a person, and the key to remain grounded is to keep the focus on one's family.
Actually, since April up to now, so that's 8 months. Yeah, I'm actively applying. Pero mahirap din kasi talaga dahil ang daming nawalan ng trabaho. Hindi lang Pinoy, kahit mga Japanese, yung mga nawalan ng work. Dahil lahat naman ng industry apektado talaga. Especially yung hotel, restaurants, and the tourism industry, just like in the Philippines, di ba?
Meanwhile, 25-year-old Jansel Villacarte has been in New Jersey, USA for 5 years. Apart from her mass communication degree in the Philippines, Villacarte decided to take up nursing in New York as she plans to settle in the States with her mother.
I was in the process of doubting myself during the job hunting. Luckily, I found one, and it was not easy either. As a pediatric nurse, I had to be there not only for my patients, but also for their parents. I had to provide emotional support. The term patient care was given a new meaning during this time. I coped by thinking it is a big opportunity to be able to give service to these people during this challenging time. It's very rewarding.
For 27-year-old seafarer Marian Florentino, spending his days at sea is similar to being quarantined. He said the life of a seafarer is already filled with uncertainties, but much more during the pandemic. For this year, he said he will share Christmas with his shipmates, and he will just do a video call with his family if the internet signal allows.
Challenges. First is travel. Padulong kog Manila, my flight was rebooked thrice. First Air Asia and then Cebu Pacific. We cope by being patient. What can we do? We are at the pandemic's mercy.
Another kababayan also left her career in the Philippines to settle abroad. 31-year-old journalist Rhea Bragas moved to Australia in 2018 to study culinary. Bragas said relocating to a different country was a decision she pondered on for over a year.
We are so blessed to have a job during the pandemic. Giving up and going home was never an option. Everything is still working out for us. Now I ended up having 3 jobs, and I am so grateful for it.
Everything for her was a learning opportunity when she finally arrived in Sydney. Braga studied culinary and hospitality management while working as an apprentice chef and being a correspondent for a Filipino channel. However, the pandemic left her jobless, but soon she found a job in Sydney Transport. Braga said work is life is her mantra, and she is planning to spend her Christmas at work.
If you are working in the hospitality industry, it is expected that you will spend your Christmas and New Year working, giving the customers the best dining experience that they can have. But I won't mind at all because I can still enjoy watching the fireworks during the New Year in the most beautiful harbor in the world. It's just a matter of perspective. We just need to carry on with life.
For the PNA Newsroom, I am Joyce Goodies.
The country continues to struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic, along with issues and concerns that affect the safety and livelihood of Filipinos. With this in mind, what does the people think the government should focus on as a new year begins? Let's find out in our year-end Boses ng Masa.
Actually, wala ka namang maano sa pamahalaan. Yung mga tao, may social distancing, dapat sila yung mag-aalaga sa sarili nila, hindi ang pamahalaan. Buhay natin yun eh. Di ba? Wala namang issue sa pamahalaan. Ginawa. Tulad nito, si Mayor nagbigay ng mga libreng face shield, tapos tinatapon lang ng mga tao, bibili na lang ulit. O di ba? Ginawa naman ng pamahalaan talaga lahat.
Pagkagutom ng ating mga mamamayan. Because as we can see, when we go out in the streets, ano ang sabi ng mga tao? Hindi kami mamamatay sa COVID, mamamatay kami sa gutom.
Pagtutunan natin pa kung paano tayo makakabangon muli eh. Yun lang, yun ang pagtutulong-tulungan natin sa tulong ng iba.
Yun nga, sana magkaroon ng bakuna nga para umano yung ekonomiya natin. Yung lumago na, saka hindi na kami mahirap ang mga tricycle driver.
Probably the health and education. Health kasi of course, we have experienced the COVID-19 and then it's very important that we have to prioritize the health of everybody. Then education, because it is the foundation of everybody.
Patakaran sa vaccine, tapos yung wag maging corrupt.
Still to come, stories of courage, progress, and hope for a better future as we stand against a common enemy and a widespread crisis. More on this when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Every centavo of this budget must be spent to ensure our nation's recovery, resilience. The vaccine is available to every Filipino citizen.
Kumusta uwi mo dyan, anak?
Every centavo of this budget must be spent to ensure our nation's recovery, resilience. The vaccine is available to every Filipino citizen.
A highlight of the government's efforts amid the pandemic this year was the fight against communist terrorists and insurgency. Civic and cause-oriented groups joined the fight to denounce the communist movement, particularly its recruitment and exploitation of youth and minors into their cause. Here is our report.
Groups and civil society organizations this year joined hands to denounce the decades of attacks and atrocities committed by the Communist Party of the Philippines and its armed wing, the New People's Army. The League of Parents of the Philippines was formed, fueled by issues on the CPP-NPA's supposed recruitment of the youth into the armed movement. The Hands of Our Children consisted of various parents of students who were reportedly recruited by militant organizations with alleged links to the CPP, NPA, and NDF. Other multi-sectoral groups including Liga Independencia Pilipinas, Sulong Maralita, Duterte Youth Movement, Movement of Women for Change and Reform, and the Maralitang Mga Magulang ng Maynila actively participated in denouncing the long-standing communist insurgency. In August 27, the anti-communist groups marked their first condemnation rally at the Mendiola Peace Arc in Manila. More groups including League of Youth for Peace Advancement, Coalition for Peace, Kabalikat ID, and Kabataan Kontra Droga at Terorismo joined the call to end armed insurgency and struggle. The groups demanded the termination of the asylum status in the Netherlands of CPP founding chairman Jose Maria Sison as they staged multiple rallies in front of the Dutch embassy in Makati. The groups called on the Dutch government to remove all forms of protection given to Sison and the rest of the CPP founding members. These groups also heightened their call for the protection of the youth against the CPP, NPA, NDF's recruitment and exploitation of minors, including student activists, out-of-school youth, and children of indigenous peoples. For the PNA Newsroom, this is Marita Muaje.
Soldiers continue to serve the country even while paying the ultimate sacrifice in the fight against COVID-19. For them, serving others is their way of giving hope amid this trying time. More on this from Laid Gabagani.
As the most of us find ways to connect and celebrate this Christmas season, soldiers who are among those on the front line in the fight against the pandemic continue to provide services for Filipinos. Apart from securing the country and protecting the people, soldiers have been visible in the country's fight against COVID-19. They are also involved in the response and rescue efforts during calamities. Airman Second Class Charles Albert Kaayaman, a native from Bohol, said he could not come home to his family in the province for Christmas due to the pandemic. However, he said it will not be a huge sacrifice for him. Kaayaman said the challenges posed by the health crisis and the recent typhoons could be a reminder of a true reason as to why we celebrate Christmas. He added that the true meaning of the Yuletide season for soldiers is filling the empty containers with their service for the country and the people.
Laking bagay na yun sa amin na masasabi namin na yung hindi namin pag-uwi ay mas nakatulong pa kami sa ating mga kababayan dahil nandyan kami handang tumugon sa anumang mga pangangailangan.
Lieutenant Jeremy Remejia, a native of Zamboanga City, said being on the front line during the pandemic is part of the soldiers' commitment to serving the nation. Remejia said the soldiers will make the most out of the Christmas despite the prevailing health crisis.
We are with our fellow soldiers and we will be celebrating naman with Christmas, and this is one big family for us. We share the camaraderie and spirit of Christmas, and at the same time we are also exercising our safety in consideration naman po sa COVID case natin.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday expressed his admiration for soldiers for their crucial role in the government's fight against the pandemic. During the founding anniversary of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, Duterte praised the military for its 85 years of selfless service to the nation.
On behalf of the grateful nation, I express my most profound gratitude to you for your willingness to serve at the front lines as our nations face these natural disasters, calamities, and global pandemic.
For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Kabagani.
Modernizing the armed forces has been the administration's goal, and the Philippine Navy has not been amiss in upgrading its equipment. These, along with participation in naval exercises, show our Navy's commitment to protect our seas with the best tools possible. Benj Bondok has the story.
Despite the COVID-19 pandemic bringing almost everything to a standstill this year, efforts to modernize the Philippine Navy remain on track. The Navy saw the arrival of its first guided missile frigate, BRP Jose Rizal, in May of this year. The BRP Jose Rizal is capable of conducting anti-air warfare, anti-surface warfare, anti-submarine warfare, and electronic warfare operations. The ship and its crew were deployed to the biennial Rim of the Pacific exercises off Hawaii, which took place from August 17 to 31. Navy Chief Vice Admiral Giovanni Carlo Bacordo said BRP Jose Rizal's participation in RIMPAC 2020 highlights the competence and capability of the ship and its crew to undertake various maritime operational scenarios. Another highlight for the Navy this year is the partial delivery of the 10 high-speed and fast boats contracted for the Naval Special Operations Command, or NAVSOCOM. Also of great importance was the acquisition of the Scan Eagle unmanned aerial system with the assistance of the United States. During the formal turnover of the Scan Eagle UAS last November 25 at Naval Base Heracleo Alano, Sangli Point, Cavite, Bacordo said the arrival of this platform will allow the PN to greatly expand the coverage of its internal security, territorial defense, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and maritime law enforcement operations. The Scan Eagle and its associated equipment were acquired through the Maritime Security Initiative Program of the United States. Meanwhile, another milestone includes the successful negotiations for the Lot 1 platforms and Lot 2 combat systems and missiles of the Fast Attack Interdiction Craft Missile Acquisition Project. The Navy expects to obtain a total of 9 missile-equipped FAICS in the coming years. The FAICMS will replace the Force of Patrol Killer Medium or medium-sized patrol craft, with deliveries expected to start in 2022. With the FAICMS, the PN shall have the capability to defend key sea lines of communication such as Mindoro, Balabac, Sibutu, and Basilan Straits against conventional threats. Another important event for the PN in 2020 is the successful conclusion of the 5-day sea acceptance trials of BRP Antonio Luna, the second missile frigate ordered by the Navy. Also, Bacordo said parallel with equipment acquisition is the command's effort on base support and sustainment development. Meantime, the non-material aspects of the PN modernization are considered through the Capability Synchronization Matrix. The matrix is seen to identify, program, integrate, implement, and monitor the overall capability development of the Navy. Also, the Navy Chief is pleased to announce that the Navy is continuing its efforts in supporting local defense industry research and development under the Self-Reliant Defense Posture Program. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Benj Bondok.
With COVID-19 affecting jobs and businesses, Filipinos found the need to upgrade their skills or learn new ones and find ways to make use of their time and become better people in the new normal. TESDA was there at every step of the way to help those who want to better themselves even while under quarantine. Marita Mawai has the story.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought challenges to many people in 2020, but the Technical Education Skills Development Authority, or TESDA, was steadfast with its purpose of training and aiding individuals who would like to upskill themselves. These include university and high school students, out-of-school youth, displaced workers, OFWs, and ordinary individuals who want to make productive use of their time in quarantine. This year, TESDA established 59 new provincial training centers or PTCs and 2 regional training centers RTCs in the National Capital Region and Region 12. Secretary Isidro La Peña said among long-term plans is the establishment of a PTC in every province. He said the NCR is also home to various types of industries and businesses, thus the need to meet the demands of the industries for skilled workers and caters to the training needs of our kababayans. Despite the disruption of its training classes and assessment due to the pandemic, the agency has 413,312 certified graduates. Of the total graduates, 2,193 are overseas Filipino workers. Since March, La Peña has been promoting the TESDA online program or TOP, wherein instead of full qualifications, most of the courses are short courses that learners could complete. TESDA recorded a total of 1.19 million TOP registrants from March 16 to December 15. Over 661,000 learners completed their TOP. Through the help of TESDA trainees, the agency was able to provide relief while the country battles the pandemic. TESDA has so far produced and distributed more than 443,000 face masks, 40,000 face shields, 10,000 protective bodysuits, 1,200 pairs of goggles, and 17,800 liters of sanitizers and disinfectants. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, TESDA had stepped forward to provide aid to the victims of calamities such as the Taal volcano eruption. Meanwhile, since TESDA chairs the Poverty Reduction, Livelihood and Employment Cluster of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, La Peña mentioned that 143 barangay development programs were implemented nationwide this year. These development programs include a livelihood community-based food production project, training scholarships in communities, and other livelihood supports. La Peña said he eyes to implement these development programs in other disadvantaged areas next year. Also in 2021, the TESDA chief plans to establish additional innovation centers in areas such as NCR and Davao City. TESDA also plans to strengthen partnerships with industries to review training regulations and enhance enterprise-based training. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The effects of COVID-19 brought down economies around the world, and even the Philippines was hit hard as businesses closed down and jobs were lost. But the government is hopeful for 2021 as programs that support workers as well as the Duterte administration's infrastructure project are sure to cause the economy to bounce back. Here is our report.
The year 2020 is no doubt the most challenging in modern times due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which brought the daily grind to a halt and caused many changes to the lives of most people. Many businesses have been forced to reduce operations or shut down that resulted in the loss of jobs of many residents. Those affected by the pandemic include restaurants, catering businesses, and other food establishments, as well as manufacturers, producer, processor, recreational and amusement places, among others. Agustin Mendoza, Regional Director of the National Economic Development Authority in Central Luzon, however, said that despite the health crisis, the regional average inflation rate of 2.9% as of September 2020 remained within the government range. Likewise, prices of essential goods as of October 2020 remained stable and settled within the acceptable range. The employment rate went down from 94% in July 2019 to 74.2% in April 2020, primarily due to disruptions caused by the COVID-19. However, the employment rate increased to 89.7% in July 2020, an indication that the economy in the region is slowly recovering. Typhoon Ulysses destroyed some 1.3 billion worth of rice, corn, and other high-value crops in Central Luzon. Typhoons Quinta and Rolly likewise caused millions worth of damage to agriculture. Due to the huge impact of typhoons, President Rodrigo Duterte has declared Luzon under a state of calamity. Given the scale and impact of the pandemic and typhoons, coordinated actions are being implemented by concerned government agencies to help MSMEs, farmers, fisher folks, and workers, and other marginalized residents. The Department of Trade and Industry has provided livelihood packages to some 1,648 potential and existing MSMEs from the region's 7 provinces. The initiative is under the agency's Pangkabuhayan bayan sa pagbangon at ginhawa and the livelihood seeding program Negosyo sa Barangay, which are funded under the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act. The Department of Labor and Employment also provided emergency assistance under its TUPAD program, which provides 10 to 30 days of employment to displaced underemployed and seasonal workers. The DOLE also provided aid to formal sector workers through COVID adjustment measure programs under the Bayanihan to Recover as One Act or Bayanihan 2. Meanwhile, the NEDA is confident that 2021 would be a good year for the economy due to the continuous implementation of massive infrastructure projects. The big-ticket projects in Central Luzon under the Duterte administration's Build, Build, Build program are seen to help reverse the effect of the pandemic. Mendoza said these projects include the new passenger terminal building at the Clark International Airport, MRT-7, Central Luzon Link Expressway Phase 1 and Phase 2, and the Philippine National Rail North 1 and 2 project from Tutuban to Malolo City, Bulacan, and then to Clark in Pampanga. These projects will give a multiplier effect that could help stimulate the economy of Central Luzon. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Laid Kabagani.
Up next, we bring stories of triumph and keeping hope alive in the world stage amid the COVID-19 crisis and other challenges. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Every centavo of this budget must be spent to ensure our nation's recovery, resilience. The vaccine is available to every Filipino citizen.
This is the new normal of traveling. The hottest hotspots are popping. And the bottles of alcohol are flowing. Who's ready to check in? Welcome to paradise.
Good morning, ate! Meron ba kayo?
That we do.
Taray!
Each guest is entitled to a complimentary sanitation kit. Accommodations are by reservation only. Walk-ins will not be entertained.
Huh? Ano daw?
Very good!
Meanwhile, we will do what we can to keep the hotel immaculate.
Automatic oh.
Please step on the circles. Aba, nakaapak naman ako ng tama sa bilog.
Uy, Doy, bakit hindi pa napaandar?
Shiny! So, this is a corner suite?
Sa third floor po kayo, ma'am, sir. Third floor, please.
Uy, bakit kaya? Tanungin mo yung driver.
What? It gets better?
Enjoy your stay, people!
Travel safe!
Mabuhay!
Pag naglalakbay.
Have a safe trip, Pinas!
Every centavo of this budget must be spent to ensure our nation's recovery, resilience. The vaccine is available to every Filipino citizen.
Years of neglect and abuse at the hands of man has brought massive environmental damage to Boracay Island and Manila Bay. The government's efforts aim to restore these areas into a more beautiful and environmentally viable state, even despite criticism and the challenges brought by the pandemic. More on this from Joyce Cudis.
The government further pursued this year the rehabilitation of the world-famous tourist destination Boracay Island and the historic Manila Bay, recovering the areas lost to encroachment and trash. The anti-encroachment crackdown amid the rehabilitation in Boracay has resulted in the recovery of illegally occupied forest land, easements, and wetlands. Environment Secretary Roy Simatu said operations against 9 establishments that were illegally occupying protected forest land in Boracay resulted in the filing of cases for violating the revised Forestry Code of the Philippines and the Water Code of the Philippines. About 73% of the 339 structures in Boracay complied with easement regulations. Simatu said recovering and restoring the wetlands are part of activities in addressing Boracay's environmental degradation. In April 2018, the government began Boracay Island's 6-month closure so rehabilitation work can start without much interference. The government reopened Boracay in October that year, drawing the public's praise for rehabilitation work done so far. According to DNR, the government targets to finish Boracay Island's rehabilitation by May 2021. Meanwhile, the DNR-led rehabilitation for Manila Bay includes getting rid of the bay's accumulation of trash and recovering the 500-meter-long stretch of the coast bordering the Baywalk area to create a white sand beach. That will give people the opportunity of experiencing an accessible white sand beach, according to DNR Undersecretary Benny Antiporda. Antiporda allayed fears the white sand beach project will harm Manila Bay's marine environment. He said the white sand the government is using to create the beach is not synthetic material, as critics allege, but crushed dolomite boulders. Dolomite's content is calcium carbonate, which is also found in coral reefs, so the sand isn't foreign to Manila Bay's marine ecosystem. He also said the environment-friendly engineering intervention in the white sand beach area will prevent erosion of crushed boulders being laid. Antiporda believes nature is positively responding to the government's ongoing rehabilitation work for Manila Bay. The rehabilitation is making Manila Bay cleaner, so the area is starting to become a haven for fish again. He said increasing the availability of fish is attracting Manila Bay egrets searching for food in a place where there was previously too much pollution. For the PNA Newsroom, I am Joyce Cudis.
Filipinos continue to enjoy their sports entertainment thanks to sports leagues entering so-called bubbles where they can play safely. How were sports teams able to play amid the threat of COVID-19? More on this from Marita Muahe.
If there is one word that has been officially added to the list of lingos sports writers have been using this year, that would be bubble. To finish the 2019-2020 season amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the National Basketball Association redefined bubble by inviting 22 teams to converge at the ESPN Wide World of Sports complex in Orlando for a shortened regular season climax and the ensuing postseason. Following its success, 4 Philippine club leagues considered pushing through with their postponed seasons inside bubbles of their own in provinces already under the modified general community quarantine. The Philippine Basketball Association, through the help of the Bases Conversion Development Authority, held its bubble in Metro Angeles, also known as Clark. While the National Basketball League had its own bubble in San Fernando through intervention from Pampanga Governor Dennis Pineda. The Chooks to Go Pilipinas 3x3 began that would be its 2020-2021 season inside the President's Cup bubble in Calamba, Laguna. Meanwhile, the Philippine Football League did not look further for a bubble battleground as the PFF National Training Center in Carmona was available. Only the Chooks 3x3 bubble was nearly identical to that of the NBA as everyone mainly converged at the Inspire Sports Academy, so the players, league and team officials, and even the media can just simply go down from their bedrooms to the basketball court and vice versa. The PBA and the PFL have interesting setups to their bubbles as to their billeting areas were actually outside Angeles and Carmona respectively. On where the NBL delegation stayed during the league's bubble is unknown, but one can assume that it is also situated in San Fernando City, Pampanga, and is accessible from the Bren Zaygiao Convention Center. Like some other sports bubbles that took place amid the pandemic, at least in the cases of the PBA and the PFL, not everything was perfect, especially when suspected cases arose. Late in October, the PBA bubble suddenly went in peril after a referee and a player from Blackwater were tested positive for COVID-19. Eventually, the 2 suspected cases turned out to be false negatives, and the league resumed its season after a surprise Halloween break. Meanwhile, a total of 9 people were tested positive for COVID-19 upon entering the PFL bubble. This raised some alarms to the Santa Rosa City government, but following an assurance from the league and the Games and Amusement Board, the bubble pushed through. The 2020 Philippine Pro Sports bubbles are now set to be considered as precedents as other tournaments are now considering holding their season inside those of their own. The Philippine Superliga planned to hold its annual beach volleyball tournament inside a bubble at the Metro Olongapo area or the Subic Bay area. The National Collegiate Athletic Association, on the other hand, is planning to hold its men's basketball season also next year. Even the national teams are entering bubbles. In fact, Gilas Pilipinas men were the first to do so, putting up a training bubble inside the Inspire Sports Academy for the second window of the FIBA Asia Cup qualifiers, which happened inside a bubble in Manama, Bahrain. The National Open, the first of two scheduled for next year, will serve as a qualifier for the Tokyo Olympics. However, expect these bubbles to be among the last, as Philippine sports is expected to go back to its regular track once the COVID-19 vaccines arrive early next year. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Marita Muaje.
The Philippines continue to pursue excellence in sports, even with a pandemic shutting down most venues and restricting events. Filipino boxers rose to the challenge of making it big amid the pandemic. Here is our report.
Contact sports, especially fight sports, were among the most heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic during the most of 2020. But as things slowly got better, sports also slowly made its way back into the fold in the form of bubbles, or in many combat sport cases, a closed-circuit environment. Like other fighters, Filipino fight sport athletes still got to show their wares during the year. Some, however, stood out among the rest. Mike Plania shocked the world on June 17 in Las Vegas when he defeated American world title contender Joshua Greer. Plania introduced himself right at the very first round when he quickly sent Greer to the floor for the knockdown. Although a 1-point deduction slightly hurt his cause, Plania would still go on to take the majority decision victory. If given a chance, Plania could be primed for a world title shot as soon as 2021. Janriel Casimero is moving to 2021 in high spirits after knocking out Duke Maika to keep his World Boxing Organization bantamweight title last September in Uncasville, Connecticut. In fact, Casimero, now under MP Promotions, believes he's ready for a title unification shot with either of the two World Boxing Association champs, regular champ Guillermo Rigondeaux and super champ Naoya Inoue, who also holds the Ring Magazine and International Boxing Federation belts. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Bench Bondo.
From health crisis to calamities, the country has grappled with several adversities this year. Some people had to live through these situations, but despite the hardships, hope still lives on for them. Joyce Cudis with the story.
When Typhoon Ulysses struck parts of the country on November 11, the districts of Tumana, Malanday, and Nangka of Marikina were among those covered with mud in the aftermath. The victims said it was like a flashback of what happened during Typhoon Ondoy in 2009. Gina Tinidoro was a victim of the recent flooding. Her two-story house in Barangay Tumana was covered with flood waters up to the second floor, and most of their belongings were damaged beyond saving. Tinidoro and her 4 children have only relied on her husband's meager income as a mason for their daily needs. On December 4, her husband died due to heart and lung complications. Tinidoro later on received financial assistance from several government agencies such as the National Housing Authority and the Department of Social Welfare and Development. Bebe Almodiente was also left jobless, leaving the fate of her 2 children in the hands of generous people, distributing food and financial aid in their area as well as the local government. Her husband also found it hard to look for a construction job during the pandemic.
Nga po, yung binigyan kami ng Chuchi, binigyan po kami ng NHA, binigyan po kami ng DSWD.
Both Tinidero and Almodiente said they are asking for help from the government so they could start a new livelihood. Chuchi Foundation Philippines, a Buddhist humanitarian organization, encouraged residents to help their community through a Cash for Work program. Cash for Work incentivizes every community to clean up homes and neighborhoods by paying each participant 1,000 pesos a day if they are cleaning their own homes. Typhoon Ulysses is the deadliest and most destructive tropical cyclone to hit the Philippines this year. That's why this Christmas, a simple meal amongst family, the compassion of kind people, and the support of the government are what keeps them clinging onto hope.
Maging sagana kami itong Pasko, ngayong Pasko na to. Kahit unti lang, pagsalasaluhan namin mag-iina. Doon lang po, masaya na ako, ma'am.
For the PNA Newsroom, I am Joyce Cudis.
Here are the top stories for today, December 31, 2020. We take a dive into the government's response to the global pandemic that battered the world this year. Know how Filipinos have united in the fight against communist insurgency. Learn how the economy is bouncing back amid the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. And check out this year's rising stars of Filipino boxing. Thank you for joining us throughout the year 2020 at the PNA Newsroom. To check out more news stories, visit our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also watch us on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that bring holiday cheer and inspire change. I am William Theo, and let's welcome 2021 with optimism and hope as we stand with our families and friends to face the challenges of the year ahead. A very happy New Year to everyone.